Now, here in the UK, MPs at Westminster are facing a momentous decision today as they prepare to vote on a bill which would allow assisted dying in England and Wales. If passed, it would allow terminally ill adults to end their lives if 2 doctors and a High Court judge approve. Today's debate comes after weeks of intense discussion with strong opinions on both sides. Our political correspondent Harry Farley has the details about what is being proposed.
Nearly a decade on from MP's last vote on assisted dying, today will be historic, whatever the result. The proposed changes are being made by this Labour politician. Kim Leadbeater came top in a lottery of MPs who get to suggest a new law that Parliament then debates. If it passes, this law would apply to adults with a terminal illness judged to have less than 6 months to live. They must have expressed a clear, settled and informed wish to end their own life, free from coercion or pressure. 2 doctors must sign that all those safeguards have been met, and a judge must give final approval. A doctor can prepare the substance to end the life, but the person must self-administer it. As the arguments have taken shape, prominent figures have taken sides. Former Prime Minister Gordon Brown said it would alter society's attitude towards the elderly and disabled. David Cameron has changed his mind and supports the bill. He argued it would achieve a meaningful reduction in human suffering.
What I cannot accept is the status quo. And I've heard many stories in the last few months of people coming up to me with painful deaths, horrible deaths, people who have taken days, hours to die, and loved ones who have got the trauma, not only of their loss, but of that horrible death. And that is something that has to change.
My father was technically expected to die. He was in intensive care for over 3 months. He miraculously made it through because the doctors did everything they could to save him, and he lived for another 20 years. So, that was an incredible blessing. He saw his grandchildren grow up. In my experience of life and some of the other constituents who've written to me, we can't predict with certainty when that moment is going to come. And so I think we should be asking our medical profession and our doctors to focus on finding the cures, focus on keeping people alive, and not on allowing their patients to kill themselves.
MPs will begin debating just after 9:30 this morning. Both sides acknowledge this is a major social change, and we can expect passionate arguments both for and against this law. The vote is expected around 2:30 this afternoon. But today is just the first stage. If it passes, the bill will go through further scrutiny and many more hurdles in Parliament before it could become law. Harry Farley, BBC News in Westminster.
Let's speak to our political correspondent Rob Watson. And Rob, give us a flavour of the debate that we've heard so far this morning.
Very passionate, very emotional, immensely serious, as you would expect, Lauren. This is, after all, a matter of life and death. It's been the House of Commons and, you might say, I guess, political debate at its very best. And essentially, we've heard that the main arguments for and against, the main argument for coming, of course, from Kim Leadbeater, the MP that you heard from there, who's proposed this, essentially giving a number of truly heartbreaking, really, really grim examples of people having truly horrible deaths from cancer, saying, why shouldn't they have autonomy and choice in death, and that there would be all sorts of safeguards, she said, to make sure that people who are elderly, disabled or had chronic illnesses, they wouldn't be included. And then the counter-argument from several MPs saying, look, this is crossing a red line. It may start with a very restricted form of legislation, just people who have a 6-month terminal illness, but how do you know that it wouldn't expand? How do you know that society wouldn't feel encouraged to do this if they felt that the state had essentially legalised suicide? And the second argument, of course, from opponents, and again made with some passion by several speakers, that how could you know that people weren't being coerced? How would you know if this bill was passed that people wouldn't think to themselves, I'm a burden on my family, my care is it's costing the country, that there would be coercion on an individual level that no doctor, that no judge could actually see. So that's been the argument, very passionate, immensely serious.
And it is a free vote. Do we have any clues as to which way it's breaking in terms of the numbers voting on either side?
Certainly not based on who's spoken so far, Lauren. It's been pretty even with about the same number of MPs for and against. And it is so hard to predict because very unusually, as we noted, for debates in the British Parliament, this is not being directed by party, by the government. MPs are allowed to vote on the basis of conscience. Now, it's certainly the case that when Parliament debated this 9 years ago, that there was something like 3 times as many MPs against assisted dying as for it. We now sort of sense that that has changed and that the vote will probably be close, will probably be much, much closer than 9 years ago.
And although there was this idea of it being a free vote, some high-profile politicians have been weighing in, haven't they?
Yes, they have. So while it's absolutely the case that the government has said we are neutral, we're not getting involved in this, we've had former prime ministers for and against, more against than for. We've had senior politicians, including those inside the government, saying yes, the government is neutral, but we do have reservations. And rather importantly and interestingly, 2 of those senior government politicians who've been against assisted dying is the health secretary, the person responsible for health in this country, and the Justice Ministry. Now, those things matter because, of course, if this bill passes and it becomes law, health and the courts will become involved.
Rob Watson, thank you very much indeed. Earlier I spoke to Jacqueline Hermans. She's the president of Association pour le droit de mourir dans la dignité. In English, that's the Association for the Right to Die with Dignity. It's a pro-assisted dying group in Belgium, where assisted dying has been decriminalised since 2002. Jacqueline described how Belgium's law is perceived in Europe and elsewhere.
In Belgium, there is a very broad support for the law on euthanasia. I don't say that there are no more opponents and there are no more controversy. Yes, we debate about this, and we debate sometimes about specific cases like patients with psychiatric disorders. Abroad, it depends. Sometimes there are people who invite really our law, who really want to follow, I should say, not our model, but our way to tackle this issue. And sometimes, well, Belgium is like a scarecrow, you know, it's horrific in Belgium and so on. And for example, there's some caricature I remember that Minister of Health in France declared that you have only to ask for euthanasia 3 times and it's okay. It's not the truth.
Now, in the UK, a lot of discussion has, or people who are opponents have often said there's the slippery slope idea that if you bring it in with certain safeguards, then later on things get changed. And they often cite the example of Belgium, where I understand now that it also applies to children. Can you explain to us how people got round how that's perceived there, the idea that children might also be allowed to have assisted dying?
You know, we had a large debate on this issue and with specialists, with pediatric specialists. And, well, it was, you know, really a matter of children who are with no hope to become adult. And I must say that the conditions for children to get euthanasia are more severe, more strict than for adults. And until now, it was changed in 2014. We have received 6 declarations about euthanasia of children. So it's very rare. But, you know, the possibility for a child, but it's not a child of 2 years old, it has to get the capacity of discernment. Well, you know, it was, I should say, a step forward, but it's, and I'm very lucky, we are very lucky about this. It's very rare because, well, it's not a question of euthanasia. It's a question of people, of children who are with a severe condition, who are not getting adult and who are suffering a lot.
Jacqueline Hermans talking to me earlier.